Three, two, one. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, and a very happy new year to you all. We are back after a long hiatus, and this is a highly requested video. Actually, today we have a special episode. I'm joined here
That's
with my
right.
co-host Abraz. And Abraz, would you like to tell them what this episode is all about?
Good to see you, Sam, first of all, after a very, very long break, but back with episode two. We're talking about the big one, the Border Gavaskar Trophy that just concluded a couple of weeks ago. There's a lot of cricket coming, so I'd like to say stay on board with us because 2025 is a year of cricket. There's a lot of cricket about to come. There's a lot to be covered. Next month we've got the Champions Trophy, which we'll be covering, and then all these leagues with the Bangladesh Premier League, the Big Bash League underway right now. Then we have the IPL obviously coming up. We've got a lot of cricket coming up, so it's going to be exciting. But today, I think it's important that we have one entire episode for one of the best test series that I think I've personally ever seen. Had a little bit of everything this series that just ended down in Australia. And so, yeah, that's what we're going to be having a little bit of a talk about. So, I think let's start off with obviously Australia thrashing India 3-1. It would have been 4-1 had it not rained in that game, which would have definitely been an Australia win. But is this Virat Kohli's World Test Championship dream gone? Is this India's dream that made two finals in the last two editions that we've had, and this time they just completely disappointed? Is that something? Is this the last we've seen of Virat Kohli and Rohit Sharma in these test matches?
I think that's a very good question to ask, and it's a very deep question. It's something that we all know that Indian fans have been sort of, avoiding because they don't really want to face a reality. Rohit Sharma and Virat Kohli are arguably the two pillars of this Indian cricket team in almost all formats, bar T20 as they've just retired. We know a lot of players in the current team are actually inspired by these two. Nitish Kumar Reddy, for example, he famously said that, he was counting the days, hoping that he can make the team early so he can play with his idol Virat Kohli. But now comes the question that is it always good to meet your heroes? We know Virat has been in a slump for a while. This is no surprise. This really is no surprise. He's had less runs than Cummins. I think, sorry, him and Rohit scored solo. They were lower than Cummins and Stark.
That's
Two
just embarrassing. That is just embarrassing. It's
Exactly. Arguably the greatest batsman of the past generation, Virat Kohli, to many, a fall from grace to the point where he is now struggling to keep up with bowlers in the batting lineup. So
it's quite pathetic as well, isn't it? How he got out in every single game. It's ridiculous how you have a player of his stature just making the same mistake over and over and over again. And obviously, it was all over social media as well. Everyone was talking all about it. I saw this one. Everyone was talking about that one Sachin Tendulkar innings where he scored a double century without hitting a single cover drive. And that's the kind of patience you need in Test cricket. And it's the kind of patience that Virat Kohli has had. You know, he's one of the best players in the world, technically, and in terms of his approach to the game, he's always been very disciplined. But it's very I would say it's very disappointing for him and Rohit Sharma as well because you said they retired from T20s, and that happened right after a really good thing, a really happy ending for them with the T20 World Cup coming to their hands. And I think if they had just won one more game in this series, if they had just not fumbled this, they would have probably had a chance at the World Test Championship one more time, and if they'd won it, maybe they would have probably retired with a happy ending there as well. But it was a big fumble from India. New Zealand and Australia combined had 6 wins out in 8 games against them in the last two series. They got completely demolished at home, 3-0 against New Zealand, and then 3-1 here as well. It was very disappointing, I think, for India fans to see that happen. And of course, the statistic you mentioned, I've got some numbers here as well. Rohit Sharma and Virat Kohli combined scored 221 in this series and Pat Cummins and Mitchell Stark scored a total of 256 in this. That's not normal, dude. That's not normal. It's
It is
Virat
not.
Kohli, and out of that 221, Virat Kohli had 1 century.
Yeah,
So
that the Sydney 1 for 1, I think.
exactly, and then it was exactly 100 not out, and then so he scored a 90 runs in the rest of his other 8 innings that he played. And Rohit Sharma, I won't even talk about him. He had an average of 6.5, I think, and scored 30 something runs. It was absolutely disgusting.
I'll
It's not what you expect.
I'll also just before we move on to the next topic, I'll also put up another very interesting stat. Rohit Sharma in Australia has had a total of 0 test centuries.
Yeah.
So the question now begs, is there a reason that he should be in the team? Has he been hogging a position for far too long? And is it time for India to swallow the pill and start getting rid of him?
It's a good question, but then there's always the question of who would replace him. I mean, India, it's not like they have a limit of the
I'll
talent
say
they have.
this. I'll say this. Arguably one of India's most refined test batsmen, Cheteshwar Pujara, who's actually skilled in these tracks. He is now a variety commentator, a variety sports commentator, right? Do you think that India has a star power problem where just because of the name, a lot of good players in different formats are not getting their spot?
Yeah, it's not an India problem. It's I think a whole South Asian problem, where there's a very big culture of having respect for seniors, which is obviously very important. Senior players deserve respect, but at what point do you move on? Like there's some teams that do it very well. They run through their players very well. It's just not something we're able to do. We're seeing right now, for example, in Bangladesh, they just struggled for so long to do that with their senior players. They just tried to hold on to them, but it isn't ending very well there either at the moment. But that's a different story for a different time.
Uh,
Um,
yeah.
but that's definitely a thing, that they should be there should be a time when you say, hey, you know what? It's time for me to step aside. And I understand the problem here, and that's that they want to end it off in a good way. But Rohit Sharma, he even after the series finished, he said he's not done.
Mm.
So that I mean, how can as an opening batsman, captain of the team, you average 6.5? That's ridiculous, and you know.
Especially in tests, yeah, you need that strong start. That sort of dictates what the rest of the game is going to be like.
Of course, they had the other opener, Jaiswal, do really good. We'll talk about him in a bit, but with India heading out, that opens up a door for another country to in this World Test Championship finals. And that's South Africa, not definitely not someone who most people would have thought would be making the game at Lord's a
Yeah,
couple years ago at the start of these rounds,
absolutely.
but. What a couple of games they've had in Pakistan. Temba Bavuma, he's performed very well, but he said he was in the toilets hiding for a while.
When you have a captain say that, that's a bit of an issue. But
Yeah.
interesting, you mentioned South Africa. So, South Africa, as you said, not a lot of people had them on their cards to make it to the finals. South Africa, classically not really a test focused team, right? They sort of more shine more in the shorter formats. Do you think that the World Test Championship format is unfair?
Yeah, I think it is because if you look at it, South Africa have played far fewer opponents than a lot of other teams have. And they weren't necessarily the easiest of the most difficult of opponents as well. It's very interesting. Like they've played 12 games and won 8 of them, which is impressive. But then you have Australia and India playing 17 or 19, or England playing 20 plus games, in which it's probably a bit more difficult. And some may say South Africa had easier opponents as well. There has to be some sort of standard, I think, to how many games a team plays. It's like obviously at the end of the day, it's the percentage of games you win that matters, but
Yeah.
something about it just doesn't feel right to me about how this structure is. And I'm sure they're going to change it at some point just because they've already changed it once. As soon as I remember when they started, they had a different point system depending on how many game series you're playing and all. And it was very messy. And then they decided, you know what, this isn't working. We're going to switch to the percentage of games won. And that is working better than the original, but I still think there needs to be some sort of reform here. I mean, some teams are playing half the number of games as others. West
Yeah.
Indies and Sri Lanka have played 11 games each, while England have played 22. Like you're getting far more exposure to the game, and I think it's just I also understand that they don't want to have, too many games for in countries where they're not making the revenue. For example, having 20 West Indies test matches is probably not the best for ICC revenue, but it's you got to make it fair. So it's a good question, though. It's a very good question, but it's something to look at. But I mean, I hope South Africa can prove us wrong. But I mean, it looks like at the moment, come June, Pat Cummins will be raising that mace
Yeah,
once more.
it's a tale as old as time, you know. In cricket, there's a saying, I made the saying, and it is South Africa will go to a final, but at the end, Australia will always win. That
Uh,
that
that's
is that sums up
that is
cricket.
fair.
It
That is
sums
so
up cricket.
fair.
Um, so now let's start delving into this Border Gavaskar Trophy, and a big name this time around for South Africa, Sam Constas, a 19
Australia?
Australia. Oh, sorry, apologies, Australia. Yes, but it is also a
Of
big
course.
name for India because he has been living rent free in their minds with his
Oh
antics.
my God.
So
It's
a 19-year-old rattling a mature team of the likes of Bumrah, the likes of Kohli, the likes of Rohit Sharma. What do you have to say about him, and what does this really say for
you
Australia?
love it. You love it. This kid is younger than us, man. And so I grew up in Australia, and there was a point in my life when I was a kid, when I was 11, 12 years old, when I wanted to become a cricket player, and I wanted to become a cricket player for Australia. At that point, this kid was still probably running around in his diapers or something, man. It's that's how crazy it is. Like this guy, and look at him now. He's 19 years old, and he's got this. Forget the Indian team. He's got 1.3 billion people crying about him. It's insane. But it's this whole his whole antics that he had with Virat Kohli definitely helped his side with people loving him more and hating Kohli with the shoulder budge. It was completely unnecessary from Kohli, but it really helped. And this series, one of the big things I loved about this series was the rivalries that were there. These one-on-one battles that we had. There was of course the Kohli versus Constas battle. As well as with Bumrah, with how he smashed Bumrah across the park. That
Absolutely.
That was insane. I couldn't believe what I was watching. Of course, there was the Muhammad Siraj and Travis Head incident, and then the battle that had that the two of them had between them. Complete miscommunication, language barrier there, but it led to something that was great for the fans, which was fierce competition. There was the Yashasvi Jaiswal versus Stark when he claimed that it was coming too slow in that first game in the WACA, only to be dismissed in the next innings for a golden dunk by Mitchell Stark. You love to see it. These little things are what makes sports amazing. The rivalries, the battles. But let's go back to Constus a little bit more because
Yes, yes,
I
absolutely.
love this guy. And we were talking a while back about respecting elders and how some of these South Asian countries like to hold on to these elder players. But Constance shows why fresh blood is so important.
That is
Like
very true. I mean, the as we saw, you know, how he was dealing with Bumrah, right? Jasprit Bumrah over the past couple of years, he is arguably one of the most feared bowlers, if not the best bowler of the past couple of years. We saw in T20 players are scared. They're scared to face him. The go-to solution to Bumrah is just survive his over. We'll take it in the next. And the thing about bringing youth, bringing a teenager, is that when you're a teenager, when you're this young, you're not scared of anything. You have nothing to lose and everything to prove, right? And to see him, be brave enough to play the shots that he did and to rattle a team, it really goes to show how important it is to maybe bring a youth prospect into your rotation. I remember way back in 2015, using Bangladesh as an example, when Mustafizur Rahman made his ODI debut, against India, picked up 5 wicket hauls. India did not know what to do with him. They did not know what to do with him because they'd never seen this man. They don't know how he plays. So Constas, it's a, it's really is a message that with your experience, take the risk, bring on some fresh blood. Don't be scared. And
Yeah, because that last point you made about, like just it not the opponents don't know what to do. And that's exactly what Constance did. It's not like he scored a million runs, but he just rattled them completely. Bumrah was, and then he's a kid with so much confidence. He gets out when he scores that 50 in that first game, and then the sideline commentator goes up and gives him an interview mid-game, and they ask him, so you completely thrashed Bumrah there, and he says, yeah, let's hope he comes and bowls again before lunch. Like he knew what he did. He rattled that Indian that Indian bowling lineup completely, and it's I love him. He's got a character in him. He loves. I think I can't remember who it was. It might have been Glenn Mac. No, what was? I don't think it was Maxwell. Someone else. It was Labuschagne. Labuschagne asked him. No, he said to Labuschagne, I love getting under the lid. I love wearing that helmet and fielding close up. I love being at that short leg, silly point, those positions. And Labuschagne asked him, I was like, does that mean you have good reflexes? Like, are you a good catcher? And he says, no, I just talk good. And that's just
A bit of a
he's got the
Sangakkara
character.
nature. A bit of a
Yeah.
Sangakkara nature. He was known
He's
for
got
his
the
sledging. He was known
he's
for
got
his.
the character, and it's amazing to see. And I think if he grows up well, if he continues doing well, if he plays maturely, he can be the next David Warner of this team. The thing that Australia are missing in that opening
Yeah,
possession.
it's and on the topic of the bowling lineup, with Bumrah, I would like to say, is he deserving of the player spotlight for this episode?
I'd say so. I would say so. We have a couple of other options. I think Travis Head is an option up there. He's done brilliantly in this series, top scorer and all. But Bumrah, holy shit, man, this guy, he's too good. Like I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of a lot of Indian players, but this guy,
No, it's hard. It's
he's
it's it's hard. It's hard when he's this good, right? It's hard to.
he's amazing. Like I don't think in the only other bowler I think since I've been growing up and like properly grown up and watched cricket that is up there is Mitchell Stark. But those two for me are the top two of the last 10 years. Mitchell Stark and Jasprit Bumrah. They're just two of the best.
Yeah, Khawaja said he's the toughest bowler he's faced, and I think this series he picked up 33 wickets, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, he was big. He was a পারতে একটু কাট করতে হবে যেমন
No
এটা
problem.
problem.
Mm,
32 আবার বলতে.
yeah. And if I'm not mistaken, he picked up 32 wickets in the series.
Yeah, it was an average of 13, which is crazy. Every 13 runs he was giving, he was picking up a wicket. It's insane. I don't think anyone like that impact is unbelievable. There have been some good bowlers in this competition. Scott Boland, 21 wickets, also at an average of less than 14, which is incredible because no one expected that from Scott Boland. But Bumrah, unplayable, unplayable at times, except for that little constant spell. He was completely unplayable in this entire series. He's his bowling action is an interesting one. I remember seeing Bumrah for the first time in 2014, I want to say, where I was watching him in an IPL game, and a friend of ours, Mir Asfaruddin,
Ah, shout
him and
out.
I, we were playing cricket, and he bowled to me while I was batting in the most weird action I'd seen, and I asked him what the hell was that, and he said, "Oh, this is the Bumrah action," and that's when I first heard of Bumrah. But his bowling action, speaking of it, it's questionable
It
because I
is.
mean, you see players like Shakib Al Hasan after years of playing, almost 20 years he's been playing Shakib Al Hasan now, and they're questioning his bowling action now. I mean, it's a weak excuse to why he bowls that good. I think regardless, Bumrah is incredible.
That is
But
true.
it's something that is interesting to bring up, but I don't want to take away anything from how brilliant this guy has played. He's the best bowler of the last few years, definitely.
Now, here is as we're ending with the Indian bowlers. Now, here is a big question. There was one name in the lineup that was not present due to injuries. And this bowler has the highest wickets per game in ICC World Cups amongst the top 10. We all know who this big game player is, and that is Mohammad Shami. Now, do you think a player of his caliber, India could have at least drawn or won the series?
I think he would have definitely made a big impact. India had two pace bowlers that were performing very well with Siraj and Bumrah. But having that third pacer might have really helped in some games. I don't know if it would have helped them necessarily because I think at the end of the day, their batting was part where I think they could have really been much, much better. So I don't know if Shami alone could have done it, but I think, and well, even Ravi Shastri, I was watching an interview he was saying that that could have been the difference. Mohammad Shami there or not. He's a game winner. So I see what he's saying. Like this guy, he wins you games, he wins you big games. I remember there was a time when he wasn't necessarily the best, but I think in the last few years he's really shaped up to be a really, really good bowler that's very difficult to face. And some of those conditions in Australia might have been favorable to him as well. And I think that yeah, that trio of Bumrah, um, and Siraj and Shami could have been very lethal. I don't know if it would have won them the series, but
At
I
least could have
think it
given
would have.
a fighting chance, a more
Yeah,
convincing, a more convincing.
we'll see in the Champions Trophy. Maybe that'll be something where
Yeah,
we'll
it's a
see
lot.
if that
It's a
made a
lot to
difference or
come.
not.
It's another opportunity for India. So we'll see there. Now, let's go. I think within the series, arguably the game that sort of defines Test cricket. As I have to turn off my notifications on my phone. Apologies. But anyway, in the series, the game I would say defines Test cricket, the MCG Test on Boxing Day. Braz, what are your thoughts on that?
Oh my God, the fourth Test match, Boxing Day Test match. I've been watching this Boxing Day Test match since I was a kid. I love it. I love the Boxing Day Test match. It's just so much tradition that one day you watch it. And, oh my God, this was a game and a half. This was, the scorecard will say Australia won by 184 runs, but that's not what the game was. The game did not feel like Australia won by 184 runs because even on the fifth day, anything could have happened. And that's test match. That's test match cricket for you. It was beautiful. You had Stephen Smith with that big 140 that he scored. You had you had the that century from Nitish Kumar Reddy. It's it was amazing. India were down and out at that point when Nitish Kumar Reddy was coming around. They were, I think, 6 for 190 or something when Australia had already scored a mammoth 474. And he comes on and he just scores that century, pushes India in the game, gives them a chance. Washington Sundar there helping him, and it showed that anything can still happen. And then when Australia came out again, it was a brilliant 5 wicket haul for Jasprit Bumrah, who bowled brilliantly in that game, getting Constas out early and all. And then that last day when we said anything can happen, we really did mean anything can happen. And it was unfortunate. India, they tried in the beginning to play it slow, play those first few overs out, and then see if they can really go for that target. It was a big target. Um, but they wanted to just test it out, and it was just unfortunate with their top order. It was Pat Cummins broke through them. Pat Cummins got rid of Rohit Sharma, got rid of KL Rahul. Stark came and gets rid of Virat Kohli the same way as always. And at that point, India had lost. India, there was no way they could win, but it was just playing out for a draw. But Scott Boland cleaned it up beautifully in the end. And then that one picture, it's of Nathan Lyon bowling that last ball, getting that wicket, and the entire crowd erupting. It was absolutely amazing.
Now, from this Boxing Day match, it proves one thing, Pat Cummins, arguably one of the best Australian captains the team has ever seen. Now, do you think, I mean, undoubtedly, the best captain is Ricky Ponting, but after Ponting, is Cummins deserved of that second place?
It's difficult. They've had some good captains, Australia. It's very, very difficult. I mean, they've had Steve Waugh, I think, is up there. I think that first World Cup they won under Alan Border, who this whole trophy is named after. Um, he's obviously a big one for them. But I think Cummins has proved himself. I think he's done enough. He's won trophies. Ponting, I think, is on like his impact is unbeatable. It's just the golden generation of Australia
Yeah.
in those early 2000s. But I mean, Pat Cummins makes cricket enjoyable. He's even in that Boxing Day Test match, it was a record crowd of 374,000 odd people. Like, can you imagine? That's more than a quarter of a million people. Obviously, some of the people were repeated that came on multiple days, but 100, it's insane how many people went to watch just that one game. Like I think I saw a statistic. Taylor Swift's Eras tour had over 3 nights had 288,000 people or something like that. And this had 375,000 people. It's amazing. It's
It's lovely
Pat,
to
and
see.
I think Pat Cummins deserves credit for a lot of that. He has made this team such an enjoyable team to watch, and his impact as a player as well with both ball and bat. He knows when it's important to be out there batting and supporting your partner on the other end, and his bowling is incredible as well. And he's definitely at least top three captains of all time, if not the second best after Ricky Ponting. That's a great question, though.
Now, on the topic of Pat Cummins, right? Pat Cummins and Mitchell Stark, two lethal players, as we saw in this test team. And we talked about Rohit Sharma and Virat Kohli. Maybe if they need to step down. Now, we know Stark and Cummins, they do not need to step down, but they're going to have to deal with a fact of life that you cannot escape.
Mhm.
And that is a cricketer with age, obviously, is going to lose his ability, is maybe not going to be the best he plays. And that is especially true for pace bowlers. Now, we know that we have young blood in the batting lineup, but does Australia have a replacement for Pat Cummins and Mitchell Stark?
They always do. They always end up finding someone. And for me, there's one player that has really caught my eye out of all the youngsters. He's not the youngest of guys, but from a cricketing standpoint, he's young enough. 26-year-old Lance Morris from
Mm,
Perth. He's done really, really well in the domestic form. I think for Perth Scorchers, he's really bowled brilliantly for them in the Big Bash League this year. I've watched a little bit of him. Um, but I think they gave him he's debuted for Australia already in ODIs last year against Pakistan. And it was right before the Border Gavaskar series, actually. And he did brilliant there as well. He picked up 4 wickets with a best of 2 for 13, average of 24. It's decent. It's very decent stuff that you see from him. Like he's definitely, I think, with time to grow, I think he can be someone who really takes up that spot of Pat Cummins and or Mitchell Stark as well. And it's something that I really think is impressive from him. And obviously, he's playing for a really good team with the Perth Scorchers, and maybe that can help him grow as well. But the Australians never fail, is I guess the answer to your question. They will find someone to replace him,
That is true.
and they'll make sure they find him easily as well.
That is
Big
true.
Bash League, we'll talk about that soon as well later on. But Stephen Smith, how good was he in that last game? He scored 121 not out. This guy is old, but he's smashing it out there with a strike rate of 190.
Yeah, no,
Insane.
I mean, Steve Smith, it's like he's had his slumps, right? He's had his slumps, he's had his ups, he's had his downs. I remember in 2023, the Ashes, he knows how to come back. He knows how to do his job, and I think players like, Kohli can really take notes. And with performances like these, and Root as well, especially last year, the question does come, who is the best out of the Fab Four? Everyone's still sort of making a name for themselves. Root is
Yeah.
still at it, Smith is still at it, Captain Kane Williamson as well. Is Kohli slipping behind? That's something to really talk about.
There's another name actually. I just thought about it as you were talking from the Australian standpoint of pace bowlers. Um, Lloyd Pope.
Ah,
He's another young one. Doesn't look very young, but but leg spinner, right arm. I think he could be another Adam Zampa, and he's done very well. I think in first class cricket, I saw a statistic. He's got like 41 wickets in 15 games or something like that. And he's very good. He's got an average of 53, which is could be a bit better perhaps, but he's got 3 5 wicket hauls, and it's really good. I'm liking what I'm seeing of him. I obviously haven't watched too much, but I looked it up a little bit, and I think he's someone who can also come in, perhaps if he's given the chance to play for his country. And Sam, speaking of players who could be the next big thing for their country, I want to talk about the other team in this competition from India. Rishabh Pant, he's obviously a phenomenal player, and I think he has the potential to be the next Rohit Sharma of this team, or the next Virat Kohli of this team as he continues to age. Of course, there was a period in the middle when he didn't play with his accident, but there was a big question in this series that came up with him, and that was that very, very idiotic way that he got out in a position when India and he didn't need to lose him. And Sunil Gavaskar, we spoke about Alan Border, but the other half of the trophy's name, Gavaskar, who was on the commentary panel at the time, didn't hesitate to hide how much he despised that shot that Rishabh Pant played. He called him stupid, I think, 3 times in the in the span of 5 seconds. And I think it got to Pant because the very next game he had a stint where he was, I think, 12 runs of 60 balls or something, which is not like Pant at all. And so then you think about it, like, yes, obviously you don't want to be hitting them all over the park like that when you don't want to be losing wickets, but like what's the balance, Like how do you choose that balance of should I play my natural play style now or should I do
I
what's more important?
guess I guess what you've really described is the core challenge of Test cricket for batsmen,
Yeah.
right? a lot of heavy hitters. I mean, Rohit Sharma's nickname is Hitman, but when you play test, you cannot be Hitman, you know. You have to adapt your style. You have to find the balance of patience. Sam Constas, young guy, you know, he's an extreme, obviously, you know, he's hitting it all over the park, but from a test perspective, you know, that's not how you should bat, quote unquote. You know, you really need to pick your shots. You really need to pick your shots. Look at Sir Alistair Cook, right? I don't think he's hit a single six ever in Test cricket, if I'm not
Hold
mistaken.
on, you just said Sir Alistair Cook, and it just threw me off because I forgot that he was knighted. I was like, who are you talking about? This like ancient player or something? Sir Alistair Cook.
So
But that's interesting. I didn't know that. I didn't know he's never hit a single six in Test cricket. That's
exactly, right? And he is to many the quintessential test player, the greatest test player um of all time, maybe as well. So if you look at that, you know, we understand the game has changed a lot, you know, fields are different, bats are different. But still, when it comes to Test cricket, you should keep your boundaries to a minimum. You should keep your risk to a minimum. It's just about toughing it out. And Pant, he's shown that he can do that. So it's really up to him to sort of fine tune that because he has that skill. It's just coming to a perfect balance. And I think, yeah, he could be one of the shining stars in Indian Test.
yeah, definitely. I think of course we saw Baz Ball with English cricket and
Hmm.
different brand of cricket, but Test cricket is it's beautiful because it's not it's always going to remain the classic format, you know. It doesn't matter how many what your strike rate is at the end of the day. You've got to just you got to know when to play. Obviously, it's important. You can win games, but depending on your opponent, depending on the situation, you've really got to adapt, and it's a real test of patience. But it's exciting to see. But anyways, now we've got a couple of practice test matches, you could call it, for Australia against Sri Lanka. They don't need to, they can lose 2-0 for all they care. They're still going to be playing that game in Lords. But yeah, I guess
So,
moral of the story is good luck to Temba Bavuma and the gang because they've got a tough opponent waiting
yeah,
for them.
and you know, as much as we know that Australia, they're probably gonna walk with the trophy. We really South Africa is a team, you know, out of all the teams in cricket, maybe bar New Zealand, this is the team you feel most for. You know, they always go to a final. They'll crawl their way to a final, but luck just won't be on their favor. So, some good luck to South Africa. Let's see
Yeah,
what they
and
can
make
do.
sure you guys are staying in touch with Edged and Gone because we have a lot of big things coming up. Like I said, we're going to have our continuations of our Cricket in a Minute. We've got a lot coming. The Champions Trophy is going to be huge. We're going to have at least a weekly coverage on that, if not even more frequently. And we're going to be having a new little video series once a month called Team of the Month, where
Mm,
Sam and I will be sitting down and giving out our opinions of the 11 best players of the previous month.
yeah,
If you
sounds
don't
good.
agree with us, let us know. But it'll be, I think we've got a lot of content coming, so stay with us. But until then, it's good morning, good evening, and good night, wherever in the world you are.